Story time about how my lying, cheating husband moved his mistress into our home. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My husband is a classic narcissist. He's a total love bomber, lies, and gaslights. We met through some friends at a party, and the day that we met, he totally love bombed me. He told me I was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen, that he wanted to marry me, and that we should have kids. Unfortunately, I believed everything he said. On our second day, he told me that he loved me. And when I didn't tell him that I loved him back, he got really upset and told me that we shouldn't see each other anymore. A few weeks passed, but I couldn't stop thinking about him, so I reached out. Worst mistake of my life. At the time, I didn't realize how wealthy he was, but boy did he start letting me know. He would flaunt that he was super rich and even invited me on a trip, which he paid for. We ended up going to the Bahamas and it was magical. Of course, I started falling in love with him. The last day of the trip, he actually asked me to marry him and I said yes. My whole family thought it was absolutely crazy of me because I only knew him for about 2 weeks. When we got back home, I moved into his beautiful house. You see, I was in a really bad situation. I had a part-time job, no savings, and basically no future. At least that's what he said. So when I moved in, he insisted that I quit my job and basically tend to the house, which I did. So I had no money of my own. This was around the time that he would start gaslighting me. Whenever we got into fights, he would call me names and just threaten me. And when I would bring it up later on, he would totally deny that he ever said anything like that. When we started planning the wedding, things calmed down. He was always at work and I was always at home. We finally got married and went on our honeymoon to Italy. And that's when he started changing even more. He would shame me whenever I tried to post a cute picture of myself on Instagram. And he basically convinced me that I was trying to get attention from other guys, so I stopped posting. Our third night in Italy, he got drunk and we got into a really big fight. I decided to leave the hotel, but when I came back a few hours later, he had a random girl in his room and told me to leave. I couldn't believe his behavior. After about 20 minutes, he let me back into the room and told the girl to leave. That's when I told him I was going to go back home and that I made a huge mistake by marrying him. He apologized and started crying. He said nothing happened to her and part of me just wanted to believe him so desperately, so I did. When we got back home, he was on his best behavior. Until one day he told me he wanted to hire a live-in cleaning lady. Little did I know it was his mistress. Part 2 is up. Part 2 of how my husband moved his mistress into our home. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. My narcissist of a husband told me he wanted to hire a cleaning lady. A live-in cleaning lady. A few days later, he shows up with this woman who clearly did not look like a cleaning lady. When I told him I did not want her living in our home, he told me that I had to do what he said because he was the breadwinner. Mind you, he told me to quit my job, so I did. That's when he told me that somebody needed to clean the house, cook for him, and basically take care of him. In other words, I wasn't doing that. Which isn't true because I made him dinners every single day and cleaned the entire house. I told him I knew she wasn't a cleaning lady and that he needed to kick her out. He got really angry and slammed the door. A few minutes later, I hear him coming up the stairs with her. He shows her to the guest room and tells her to settle in. Then he came back into the room, told me that I had to deal with it and that this is how things were going to be from now on. By the way, this girl is Russian, and my husband told me that she did not speak English. So basically, I had no way to communicate with her. But my husband did speak Russian, isn't that convenient? So, every single day, this girl would pretend to wash dishes, pretend to clean his clothes, pretend to make the bed. Oh yeah, and she would only wash his dishes, not mine. The situation was way too much for me, so I told my husband I was going to go stay with my sister. That's when he threatened me and told me that if I left, I might not be able to come back. So of course, I packed my things and went straight to my sister's house. The very next day, my husband shows up to my sister's house with divorce papers. He told me I needed to sign them because he fell in love with the cleaning lady. I told him I wouldn't sign them and he left. Then my sister called the police and told them that my husband had a woman captive in his house and that she was probably in the country illegally. And guess what, y'all? She was. The cops actually took her from the house and now he's asking me to move back in. He took the whole divorce back and wants to take me on a trip. My sister thinks I should get back with him just to make his life miserable. The problem is I have no money of my own. And to be honest, part of me still loves him. I really need some advice and perspective from someone who's not me.
So a lot of people argue that you should never look through your man's phone. But like, what if you just have that gut feeling that something's going on? And even worse, what if you do open his Snapchat and see a naked girl? So I downloaded this app called Wink and made a friend that we can call Shane. And even though Shane and I got really close over the phone, he lived in another state, so we never really got to meet. But one night he was coming home drunk from a hotel with his cousin, and I was coming home from a college party, and I said his cousin, who we can call PJ, was hot AF. And so Shane was like, oh my god, let me give you this man's snap. And a few months later, PJ and I were talking. And he agreed to drive the 4 hours to come to my state just to see me. I was busy cleaning my apartment that day preparing for him to come and told him just to walk in when he gets here. So when this man came in, I kid you not, he walked in with a bouquet of flowers. And they were a dozen yellow roses, which he knew were my favorite. And after he left on Sunday, he asked if he could see me the next week, and I happily said yes. And before long, PJ and I started dating, but this happiness was soon to end. So welcome back to me finding nudes on my boyfriend's phone. I'm sorry, ex-boyfriend now. But seriously, guys, do not be love blind because this guy literally was driving 4 hours to see me every week. He would call me on all of his breaks. All of my friends were completely won over by him. And it didn't take him long to win over my family too. And about a month in, he finally took me to meet his friends and family. Our lives meshed so well that he asked me to move in with him at a party that night. I was hesitant at first, but then I packed up all of my stuff out of my apartment and moved out of state to be with this man. And after all of that, this man switched it up on me. He stopped taking me to parties with him and started leaving on Friday afternoons while I was at work and wouldn't tell me where he was. He wouldn't come home until like 6 or 7 in the morning on Saturday. And then we would just argue the rest of the weekend about it. Like, sir, I moved away from my family, moved out of my apartment, quit my job for you. He was straight up treating me like it didn't matter, and I saw him going to his phone all the time and acting secretive. And eventually I couldn't take it anymore, so I opened his phone when he was sleeping. So part 3 to me finding nudes on my cheating boyfriend's phone. I also forgot to mention this giant red flag. We were no longer active. Like, this man had cut off our sex life. So when I grabbed his phone, the first Snapchat that I opened was from a girl who was touching herself. My heart stopped for a second, but I was like, okay, let me just give this man the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's just some girl trying to be sneaky, trying to pull one over him. But then I noticed that all of the recent snaps were from girls. So I started to go through all of his conversations and realized that he was messing with every girl on his snap. Every! And then there was this one girl who didn't have like sexual messages with him. They were more like lovey-dovey. But it went back to way before we were dating, so this man had never been faithful to me. I broke down, I blocked every girl on his snap, and then I threw his phone at his face to wake him up. I demanded to know why he cheated on me, and that's when he realized that I'd blocked all the girls and he freaked out and lunged at me. We got into an all-out brawl, and I broke my hand in the process and locked myself in the guest room. I think this is part 4 to my boyfriend cheating on me with every single girl on his Snapchat. So this is, of course, where this man just, sprinkled on a little bit of his gaslighting. I locked myself in the guest room, and then he started to cry and act pathetic from the other side of the door. Just saying that he was sorry, that he effed up, and he never meant to hurt me, and it was all his fault. And in that moment, I didn't know what else to do. I unlocked the door and cried in his arms, terrified. And I needed to go to the hospital because my hand was literally broken from our fight. Because I had given up everything and I was so in love with him, I decided to work things out, but it literally only lasted a week. We made the decision to break up, but he convinced me to keep living with him. But we set up ground rules, which included no girls over at the apartment and him not talking bad behind my back. But of course, one night when we went out to a party, we got into a massive fight and he caused a scene. And he talked so much smack about me at this party that his friend, who's a girl, turned around and was like, hey, you need to come live with me. I packed up my things and left, but I ended up moving in with Shane, the cousin, instead. And then I got really drunk one night and slept with Shane. So, for the next part. My ex cheated on me with every single girl in his Snapchat. So you might be wondering what happened after I slept with his cousin? Well, I felt awful because then me and PJ got back together a week later. You probably want to slap me, but he was different this time. He was caring, he was gentle, but literally I was not happy anymore. Everything felt so wrong. I decided to move back home with my sister, and as soon as I did, PJ started cheating on me again. And as soon as we broke up, I found out that I was pregnant. He ghosted me and left me to figure out things on my own. So I blocked him. And sadly, about a month after finding out I was pregnant, I ended up miscarrying. And PJ ended up getting a new phone and started texting me and calling me and blowing up asking to talk. And that's when I realized he didn't even know that I had lost the baby. So I decided to end up talking to him and he tried to get me back. I was extremely confused during this time. I continued to move on and away from him. But then he started just harassing me on TikTok. He would admit to cheating on me in the comments, like bragging about it. And now he has a girlfriend, so I hope someone warns her. If you have a story you'd like to share, follow me and DM me on Insta.